Hi guys, it's Kobe here, and in today's video we are talking about the tracer object in the Mograph menu. So this is the continuation of a C4D Mograph menu object explanation. So the tracer object is an object that creates spline following the animation of an object, right? So it follows the trail of an object, or it can actually create spline using the point of an object. So let me actually go ahead and demonstrate how it basically works. So I'll go ahead and go to my Mograph menu, tracer object, right? And I'll add, for instance, for now I'll add a sphere for us to see what the tracer is all about. So it does several things. So you are going to go through the parameters step by step. So this is where you drag the tracer link. This is where you drag the object that you want to trace in. So in this case, I'll drag the cube here. Right, so I have my cube here. You can drag multiple objects. It can be more than one object. And now you can see the tracing mode is set to trace path. For now, we'll change it from trace path and we'll change it to connect all objects. Right, so you can see all of a sudden it's created some spline connecting our points for us. So you can see it's generated points for us instantly. So that's basically what the connect all object does. Connect element also does work the same as well because it's one object. But if I have multiple objects, so I'll go ahead and create multiple copies of the cube. In fact, I'll use a cloner object to do this so that it will be easier. So I'll go ahead and create a Mograph cloner object. Come to Mograph cloner and make this a child. I actually reduce the size of the cube so that we see what's going on here. So now instead of the cube, I can actually go ahead and add the cloner to it as well, but I don't want, so I'll delete the cube from the tracer link. And now you can see we have only the cloning here, and if you see what's happening, it's creating this spline for us. Let me actually go to filter and take off the work plane so that we see clearly. You can see it's creating lines connecting our spheres. So I'll go ahead and add the cloner. You can see what's going on here. So that's what the connect element and the connect object does. They literally works similarly, but it has a bit of difference. So I can go in here. If I should go ahead and add more seconds, you can see it's connecting our object for us. So we can create interesting patterns using the tracer object on its own. So basically that's what the connect object and the connect, if it's one object like the clone does. But let me actually change it. So I'll duplicate the clone and I'll make it editable. So we have multiple copies of the cube in here, and now we want to put that in the tracer. So I'll actually delete the cloner, then I'll select all of this. But you see the cloner, the tracer is lost. So what I'll do is I'll lock the attribute of the tracer. So when you click on this button here, it will lock it. So whatever you select, it will still be there. So then I'll select all of the cubes and I'll drag it and drop it in the tracer, and now I'll unlock it so that you see what's going on. So you see in the tracer now it's set to connect element, and what it's doing is all the cubes I've actually dropped, it's connecting the points of all the cubes, right, separately. So they are all connecting separately. But if I should go ahead and say connect all objects, right, and sometimes with the tracer object you need to sort of play back and forth, sorry, to refresh. You can see now it's connecting all of the objects as one spline. So you can see it's connecting the point and goes through to connect to the next object as well. So basically that's the difference between connect all objects and connect elements. The elements connect elements in one object, but the all object connect every object including points in the tracer link. So that's the difference. Now the next one is trace path, and this particular one will need animation. So with this one we have to have something which is animated. So I'll go to this tab. So I have this object here, a sphere, which I've reduced the segment, and you can see it's moving and rotating. So this is a normal sphere moving and rotating. What I'm going to do is I'll select the sphere and I'll come to Mograph effector, Mograph tree, and I'll add tracer. and when you hit play, it's the tracing mode is set to trace path. So if we hit play, you can see now it's tracing the points of the sphere. All right, that is basically all the points of the sphere which is being traced. And that's because now in the trace, when you come down here, you can see we have sample. I'll explain it a bit later. We have active objects. So if I uncheck this now, nothing will happen because the object is not active. So this one always has to be on. Now the reason why it's tracing the points of the sphere is because it's set to trace vertex. So if I should uncheck this, you can see it will not trace the point, but it will trace the object alone as one object. You treat it as one object, so it just create one trail for us. And the next one is thinking. So this one we use for thinking particles, and that one is a different situation altogether. So let's see what happens. Right, so basically that's how this one works. Now let's go back to the sample mode. So the sample mode will be best illustrated if I use a different object. So I'll go ahead and do a different animation. So I'll use a cube, I'll make it smaller a bit, and I'll use a null object to rotate it. So I'll move the cube up. This is a quick animation I'm actually doing. Make sure it's set to the right dimensions. Okay, so now let's go ahead and animate the null so that the cube will rotate. So I'll set a keyframe here, and that frame, let's say 40, I'll say it should rotate like 480. I mean, it doesn't matter, I just want something extreme. So I'll go ahead and hide this particular, actually this one. I'll go into our tracer and I'll delete this sphere. So now let's see the animation we have. If you hit play, you can see it's just a cube rotating like that. So I'll drag the cube into our tracer link, and now you can see it's following the trail of the sphere using the vertices. So now I'll simply come in here into the tracer. I'll actually uncheck the vertex. I want it to trace only the object. So you can see it's tracing the object for us. And now the sample mode, that's what I want to try. The sample step, it's going to define, so every frame, so basically what it's doing is that every frame it draws a spline for us. So you can see if I should hit every frame, it draws a spline so that it follows smoothly. But when you increase the sample step, it means you reduce the number of frames that you will drop the sample. So for now, let me actually do something very significant. So I'll do it like, let's say 20, and you see the difference. So if I hit play, you can see it drew only 2 spline. If I do, let's say 10, right, you can see the splines is drawing. It's not accurate. It sort of goes after every 10 frames, then it draws a line. And you can use it smartly if there is something you want to do, see what's going on. So the more the sample step, then the more jagged your this thing will look, your trail will look. So that's basically what the sample step also does. So now let's go to the next, which is handle cloners. So this is how the tracer object deals or handle cloners. So with this one, I'll go to a different scene. So here I have a cube, right? Let me actually delete this. So here I have a cube. So let me actually uncheck. So it's normal cube, which I've cloned it on this particular clone, giving us 3 clones, and I've cloned it radially on this one as well. So I've animated the first one, which is it's moving and rotating, right? So I'll go ahead and create a normal tracer. So I'll come to tracer with the first one. So the tracer, and it's the first one which is being selected, the hierarchy, the top of the hierarchy. So if I should hit play, now you see how handle cloners is set to nodes only. So if I hit play, you can see how the splines are drawing. So basically what it's doing is that it sees only it sees this clone particularly as the node, right? So the way this clone has been cloned like 6 times on the count, so it's basically taking this clone as 6. So let me, if I should actually move it around, you can see right in the center of each of these clone, you can see it creates one like trail for each of them. So if you go ahead and animate it again and play it again, you can see it's creating 6 different splines because this is set to 6, right? So it's now handling this as one node. Now we can actually, when you go ahead and change it to immediate clones, now let's see what happens. So now it's handling every particular cube, right? It's now having its own trail. As you can see, every particular cube is having, at first it was every clone was having its own trail, but now every cube is having its own trail. So this is how it handles multiple objects. So now if you go to the next clones of clone, then now it's going to handle every vertex. So everything within the clone will be calculated. So every vertex, everything will be calculated. So this is basically how it handles clones. So next we have space, and the space, it's quite simple. So with that one I'll use a different scene. So I'll come in here and we use this old scene that we had. So you see, if I hit play, now the space is set to global. So if I hit play, everything is normal. But what happens if I should move the tracer? So for instance, I'll move the tracer to somewhere here and I hit play. It doesn't really affect it as much. You see, nothing really happens. Everything still follows the object. I'll undo and bring it back. But now if I change it to local and move it, let's see what happens. You can see where it's affecting the position of the spline. So those are the two. So the global try to stay relative to the object, while the local, it's always relative to the, I think, tracer itself. So when you move, it's set to local and you move it, your tracer to move as well. So that's the difference. So the next is our limit, right? The limit is, so as you see, let me actually bring it back to global so that, and let me reset this one to and bring it back to global. So you can see, whilst the thing is playing, even after at the end of the animation, the spline keeps staying there and it doesn't vanish. So sometimes this is what you might want and it's fine, but there are times that you want to trail, like make it follow like a tail or something, right? So when the animation and the spline too must like sort of follow it like that, and there are 2 ways you can do it. So if you want it to follow the animation, all right, then it's from, you choose that instead of setting it none. So when it's none, it means the spline will forever be there. But when it's set to from end, then with that one you can define the frames that you want the trail to follow. So right now it's set to just 1 frame. So I'll increase it to, let's say, 20 frames. And now I'll hit play and you can see it follows the cube. And now when the cube ends, the spline to, animating, and so that's what the from end does. It gives you that trail that follows it, and you can set the frames that you want it to start. You can actually make it, let's say, 6, and it will be short. It will be quite short, and make it 30, and that would be very long before it moves and all that. And the same thing applies to the from start, but that one, it draws the spline. Actually, let me go back and set it to, let's say, 10, and let's hit play. So that one draws the first few frames of the spline for you, and now it doesn't follow your animation. So those are the 2 differences. Typically, The one which is mostly used is the from end and the none. So that's the difference between the limits, and the amount is the frame rate, that the frames that you want this line to be drawn or followed. Now the types, let's go down here and go to the type. So now the type of spline that it's creating is a linear spline. So let me actually change it to from start to, let's say, from end, and I'll increase the frame rate to the amount of frames to 25. And now let's hit play to see what happens. You see, the spline that is creating is very rough at the edges, and because it's set to linear, right? So the spline type is linear, so it's straight lines creating. So if you set it to one of, you can change it to any of these shape. So I'll set it to, let's say, Bezier, and now let's hit play. I mean, it's still the same linear, like you can't see the smoothness in it. So before that one, you can get the smoothness, you have to come to the intermediate point, and that's where we choose the how smooth or how it's defined. So I'll choose uniform, and I can see now we have smooth path created. If you play again, you can see now our path is smooth. And you know, we can also close spline, which will close the spline even before it's done drawing. So that one might not be necessary depending on what you're doing, but if it can also be useful in some situations. So that's here, and down here is the number of so there with the uniform it's set to 8. If I actually set it to 1, you can see, or 0, you can see it's not getting not enough interpolation, so now it's not smooth again. So the more you add it, you can see now it gives you a bit more smoothness. And these ones too are actually, for instance, angle and maximum. That's when you set it to, like, let's say subdivide. You can see it gives you this options for you to control the angles and that. The last thing is reverse sequence. So this one will be a bit difficult for me to explain, but let me actually use, for instance, a sweep object. So I'll come in here where actually I'll create a sweep object, and I'll make it a child of I'll make the tracer a child of the sweep, and I'll use let's see, I'll use the inside, and I'll actually, let's see what happens. So I'll make the inside a bit smaller, and I'll come into the sweep, and I'll come to the object detail and the scale. I'll make it smaller so you can see where our end of the trail is and where it begins. But if I come into the tracer and I come down here and I say reverse angle, you can see now the end and the beginning of our trail changes. So this is quite technical. When you are working with something and you want the ending and the beginning, that's where you see the difference. So it reverses the angle of the spline, right? So you can actually use it in some situations to do some interesting stuff. So basically that's all about the tracer object, and it's very powerful, and you can use it smartly to do a lot of interesting things. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.